Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Niles S&A Silent Film Museum February happening, and we are in the middle of our annual Valentino for Valentine's show. Always have to do a tribute to the great lover of the silent era. And there isn't a better person to be with me on this than the keeper of the flame, Donna Hill. Hello, Donna.
Hi, Michael. Nice to see you again.
We hope that you have already watched the recorded Zoom video that we did a few days ago, where Donna just did a great job in her PowerPoint showing you all of these great photos of Rudy that she has. And all those photos are in your book, right?
I think all of them are in my book. There may have been a couple that didn't make the cut. I had an embarrassment of riches, truly, between my own collection and what people made available to me. And in the first edition of the book, because I was limited by the number of pages, the photos were very small, and I tried to cram as much in as possible. So when I did the reprint, which is the one you held up during our previous recording session, and you may have with you right there, I could put as many in as I wanted. So it's, a whopping 500 pages long, and most photos, there are many that are full-size page images, and on average it's at least two images per page. So there's a lot to see in there.
Yes, I call this the Valentino phone book.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
There are still people around who know what a phone book is. A lot of us do. Also, so Donna, how did you first get interested enough in Rudy to want to end up publishing such a book?
Oh my, that is such a long story. I first discovered Valentino when our local PBS station KQED was showing the Silent series, and this is back in the 70s, back in the ancient times before VHS and DVD and home video and streaming. And so seeing a silent film was a unique event. And so at that time they showed, Lillian Gish and Valentino and Douglas Fairbanks. And I first saw Blood and Sand, and that was my first exposure to Valentino. And it was like, I was very struck. I enjoyed the film a great deal, and I wanted to learn more about this person. And then a few years later, it coincided with the 50th anniversary of Valentino's passing. And Alexander Walker, the great British author and film critic, published a small volume, which was mostly photographs, but it was a abridged biography of Valentino called Rudolph Valentino. And so I bought that, and that sparked my interest, along with a book that was also published that year by a gentleman in LA named Jack Scagnetti, which was the recollections of Valentino's handyman. His name was Luther Mahoney, and he worked for Rudy about the last year and a half of Rudy's life. He was hired by William Cameron Menzies initially, and Rudy hired him as his all-around handyman when he purchased Falcon Lair. And so Luther worked directly with Rudy, and before he died, he recorded his recollections of working with and living with Valentino, and that just really struck my interest. Shortly thereafter, and this is also something that doesn't happen very much anymore, there used to be these things called paper shows, big antique fairs and paper shows. And there used to be one at the San Mateo Fairgrounds a couple of times a year.
I've been to many of them.
Yep. And so I went to my first one when I was 18 and bought my first 3 photos of Valentino there from a couple of paper dealers. And that started me on the route to collecting.
Well, very good. And boy, that collection has sure grown.
It certainly has.
Well, speaking of collecting, I've got something here that will interest you. I was at a collectibles store right here in Niles some years ago, and I bought somebody's scrapbook.
Cool.
Yeah, it looks like my conclusion was the person probably died, and whoever inherited it didn't want it around, so it found its way into this collectibles shop. And the first 2.5 pages, the person was probably quite a Rudy fan, because like this is the first page of the scrapbook.
Nice portrait of Rudy.
Yes, and the second page, let me hold it up here so you see the whole thing.
Yep, Son of the Sheik, all of
Yes.
those.
And they even tried to caption it a little there.
Mm-hmm.
The second page, there, maybe you can look at that and see what you got, see what it is. I'm not reading the captions very well right there. Can you see them?
Yes, I can see them. Yeah, the main photo there is one of the last photographs taken of Valentino by his good friend. It was taken in Chicago on his the last time he left Chicago before heading to New York, where he then fell ill. And her name was Mabel Sykes.
This person must have been enough of a fan, because up there it says last photo. So
right.
This person was enough of a fan to know that. And here are a few photos of Rudy and Natasha.
Mm-hmm. And then the one on the bottom is from the lost film of Saint Devil.
Okay, very good. And the last page for Rudy is this.
Very nice. Monsieur Beaucaire, again, Saint Devil, and then a headshot from Blood and Sand.
Oh, very good. Yeah, the rest of the scrapbook is just other stars, but Rudy was the first in the book. So you could tell that this person was a big fan. Now, I also like to talk about the history of Rudy getting into movies. Now, I've always been a big fan of vintage aviation from the time. And Rudy was taking flying lessons in Mineola, New York. And he met a man who at the time, his name was Norman Kaiser. He changed his last name to Carey because it wasn't a good name to have, wasn't a good time to have the last name of Kaiser in the late teens. No,
not during World War I, certainly not.
Yes, they became good friends and were hanging out together in San Francisco. And maybe you want to go on with how Norman Carey got Rudy into pictures.
Yeah, well, they met up back in San Francisco after, having been separated. Rudy had gone on tour with a play called The Masked Model, which I mentioned in my PowerPoint presentation. And he ended up in San Francisco, not exactly sure when he left the tour, but it was between Reno and San Francisco. He ended up in San Francisco and lived here for about 6 months, and met up again with Norman Carey, who encouraged him to travel down to Los Angeles to try his luck in motion pictures. And we pretty much know how that turned out.
Yes. Oh, by the way, are there any questions yet? Nope, no questions yet.
Not yet. Keep going.
Okay.
But you can tell people that they can type something into the chat, and I'll be happy to get that question to you. Oh, here we go.
Go ahead.
Okay, from Shauna Kelly. After Valentino went into aviation school with actor Norman Carey, he almost took over a stunt pilot performance for the Crash King, Dick Grace.
That is not a story that I'm familiar with. I would find that surprising, since I don't know that Valentino actually passed for a pilot's license because he had terrible eyesight.
Oh, well, it says, okay, Valentino is highlighted in my book about aviator actors, and that would be, of course, aviators in early Hollywood. So.
Oh, cool. I don't know about that book, so thank you for alerting me to it. I'm going to definitely check it out.
Well, it looks like it's a stunt pilot performance. So I think he was acting as a pilot, not an actual pilot. So.
Yeah, and I think they ended up not using him because they didn't want anything to happen to that handsome face. So thank you, Shauna, for that question. Any others right now?
Nope. No, we're good to go. Keep going. Got some good stuff going.
Okay. Now, of course, we know that Valentino passed on the same year that the first sound film was released. Of course, that was Don Juan, starring John Barrymore. And of course, it was that film that spelled the beginning of the end of silent film. And so I've always wondered, and maybe a lot of people have too, is how would Valentino have fared as the talkie era was dawning?
Well, that is always the eternal question. As we know, Valentino made 2 recordings in 1923, and these were made in the pre-electrical period, which was, of course, you know, where they sang into the horn rather than to a microphone. And you can't really tell too much about his voice. He did at least have an accent, it's especially noticeable in the Kashmiri song, where you hear him sing the lines like, whom do you lead on Rapture's roadway far, where his accent is Umma do you lead. Although a couple of his co-stars had mentioned that he had more of what is called a continental accent. It wasn't particularly thick Italian accent. He did speak a couple of languages. He spoke, you know, French. He grew up speaking French. His home life was bilingual because his father was Italian, his mother was born French. And he picked up English fairly quickly in the United States. He had to be able to get around, and he spoke a smattering of German. And of course he spoke Spanish. And it's hard to say how he would have fared in the talkie era, simply because once talkies got going, American cinema changed dramatically, and his type of roles were not in fashion anymore. It was more, you know, Clark Gable, the gangsters, the American toughs, and the foreign romantic type ended up being more of a comedy buffoon or a butt of a joke, particularly if you look at you know, the mid to late 30s in the screwball era. I think he might have fared well. My personal fantasy of Valentino making a talkie would have been Dracula, because I think he would have been great. And not to diss Bela Lugosi, because I love Lugosi's Dracula, but I think it would have been much more illustrative of the stage Dracula without having the overtness, but it would have been more pre-code, much more sexy, you know, the dangerous sexual kind of Dracula that you see in modern productions of the day. And I think, you know, it of course would have typecast him, but it's one of my favorite fantasy what ifs. Oh. And also just to say that Valentino at this point, you know, when he was making The Eagle and Son of the Sheik, he was very much aware that his time on screen as a screen lover was short. And he had planned, he wanted to, you know, produce and direct, which is the goal he was heading toward before his untimely passing. So he may well have been off the screen by the time talkies really got going.
Okay, do we have another question?
Yes, so Christine Kimmy says hello to both of you. She's Facebook friends with both of you. And
Yes.
Sylvia Valentino, grandniece of Rudolph Valentino. And also Tracy has a question. What is Donna's opinion of the current online trend to colorize the vintage black and white photos?
Oh, well, some of them I don't care for because the colorization is extremely bold and not true to life. I mean, there are some artists who really do a beautiful job colorizing photos that don't take away from the shading and the depth of a black and white photo. I mean, back in the day, hand tinting photos was a thing. It was, you know, from the dawn of photography, hand coloring a photo was a thing. It's not my favorite thing. I prefer black and white myself, but, you know, people love it. What I find really troubling these days is using the AI or artificial intelligence software to colorize photos and or take a film and colorize it, where it's just sort of like a blend of brown, pinks and green, and it just looks terrible.
Yeah, sometimes they do a really good job on them, but I always think, like, for instance, on Facebook, when they put up a colorized photo, I would say, you know, put up the black and white one too, so I have the option of looking at.
I mean, unfortunately, and this is just my opinion, in some of the photographs, when they do colorize them, they take away and flatten them, so it really takes away the photographer's art, and it just doesn't look good.
Yeah.
But, you know, other people, they love it. And I just prefer to, for the most part, just keep my mouth shut and just pass right by.
Yeah, because black and white photography and film is an art form unto itself. And I
Exactly.
think, you know, if people want to colorize all that, fine. But, you know, just give me the option of seeing the way it really was. So anything else coming in?
I'd much rather see a beautiful scan of a nice black and white photo to show off how lovely it really is.
Exactly. Anything else coming in?
No, Michael, I'll let you know next time we have a question.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned that, you know, Rudy passed away in 1926, and he was interred there at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, but where he is interred was not going to be his original final resting place, right?
That is correct. Initially, they his manager George Ullman and a group formed to fund and create a monument, although the location for it I don't think was ever determined. It didn't get very far, and one of the ladies who donated to the fund ended up suing because this didn't happen, and then the Depression happened. And as I recall, she won her case. She was in Los Angeles, and I've got some snapshots in my collection of her visiting Hollywood Forever, or then Hollywood Memorial Park, where Valentino was buried, and also visiting up at his house at Falcon Lair. So, you know, his passing was so sudden and so unexpected that his good friend June Mathis, who had 2 or 3 plots, crypts purchased at Hollywood Forever, offered to loan her crypt as a temporary place of burial for Valentino. And sadly, of course, almost exactly a year later, she passed away unexpectedly. And so his body was quietly moved to the crypt next to hers. And she was interred in the crypt where he was originally laid to rest. And his family later purchased the crypt from June Mathis's widower, Silvano Balboni. And so below June Mathis is buried her mother, Virginia, and then Rudy is buried to her right, where he remains to this day.
Well, I think it's really nice that he is there next to her, because she was basically the, you know, he was kind of just hit the big time because of her.
Oh, yes,
you want to
exactly.
go into a little bit of that?
Well, she saw Valentino in Eyes of Youth, and she was writing for Horsemen of the Apocalypse at the time. And of course, Metro Pictures and June Mathis and Rex Ingram were not necessarily the butt of jokes, but the wags in Hollywood were thinking that once they purchased Blasco Ibanez's novel, that this was going to be a humongous flop because it was a war film. And of course, you know, having been through World War I already, most people were not interested in, you know, reliving the experience, which was horrific for the soldiers who served, and, you know, the people whose family went through all of the tragedy. Well, of course, it was an anti-war picture, and Mathis, having seen Eyes of Youth, saw something in Valentino and pushed for him to be cast as Julio. Now, the studio really didn't want to have a relative unknown in the part, but she pushed for it, and both she and Rex Ingram supported Valentino and encouraged him during filming. And I believe, in my opinion, it is my favorite Valentino film, and it is a performance that still stands up very well today. The entire film, not just Valentino. It's a massive, epic film, and it still works. It's a really great film. And their friendship was born because of that. And while they did have some ups and downs later on, there was always affection between the pair of them. And it is ironic and ultimately a lovely gesture that it was, you know, her final gesture to offer Valentino a place to be laid to rest, and that they reside or are laid to rest next to each other.
Okay. Now, of course, one of the most famous scenes that Valentino ever appeared in was the scene that really put him on the map was the tango scene from Four Horsemen.
Yes, that's correct.
And the lady that he was tangoing with, I just thought of this and I can't remember her name right now.
Her name was Beatriz Dominguez, and she was a relatively famous dancer from Southern California.
And the way I hear it, unfortunately, she passed away like later that year, right?
Yeah, correct. I want to say it was like appendicitis. It was the result of a surgery. So she died of peritonitis, which of course was ultimately what killed Valentino as well. And she didn't have billing in the credits. And I believe this was her last film appearance. But she was a noted dancer. She danced famously in San Diego, and I can't remember the event. It was like a World's Fair kind of event down in San Diego, and she was a very well-known dancer.
Oh. Well, it's interesting that you know, certain people who nobody would ever know who they were just live forever now because of that one dance scene, and she will live forever just like Rudy.
That's the beauty of film.
Yeah. So anyway, moving on here, as far as dancing, Rudy did a lot of dancing with Natasha during that time he was on strike, right?
Yes, they were engaged by Scott Preparations, who made mineral lava beauty products, which was, you know, beauty creams and face wash and clay, you know, like, and so the part of the deal was that they would promote the product. They would dance for like 10 or 15 minutes, and they had 2 or 3 dances that they would do, pitch the product, and then there would be a dance contest held at the venue, and also a beauty contest. And the press would come in the city like the week before to promote this, put advertisements in the newspaper for, you know, women to enter the beauty contest, and they would parade before Valentino. And I don't know that he actually was the sole judge for all of them. I think it was, you know, basically dignitaries like, you know, aldermen, mayors, anybody in the local city government that would also cast the vote for the winning beauty. And in the end, the 88 plus women traveled to Washington, D.C. for a press junket, and then they ended up in New York at the old Madison Square Gardens, where there was a huge beauty contest where they were voted into, you know, gradually dwindling winners to the top 5. And then the winner that was crowned the beauty was a lady from Vancouver or Toronto. Her name was Norman Niblock. She was, I think, 18 years old. And they all posed with Valentino. And he was not, again, he was not the sole vote. There was a whole bunch of judges. There was other entertainment, like Paul Whiteman was there. A couple of opera singers sang. But it was a big deal. And the tour itself was exhausting. It went for roughly 3 months, and it was, you know, whistle stops across the United States. And they, because of the injunction against Valentino by Paramount and Famous Players Lasky, he couldn't actually perform in theaters. So they had to, you know, erect tent shows, use the local armory building in the town, or ballrooms in hotels, wherever they could set up to have these dances.
Oh, I didn't know that he couldn't perform in theaters. I knew he couldn't make movies for anybody else, but I didn't know that he couldn't perform in theaters. So it was
yeah, the injunction was that he could not perform on stage. He couldn't, you know, perform on film. But they left the window open for, you know, tent shows and armories and things like that, where it wasn't actually a theater. But the Whistle Stop tour was exhausting. Natasha missed a few of the performances. And a good friend of mine actually chronicled, you know, went through microfilm and came up with the list of all the stops. And it was grueling. So once the tour ended, and Valentino and his attorneys were negotiating with Famous Players Lasky to renew his contract, right before he left on vacation to Europe for 3 months. They'd struck a deal, so he was set. He got what he wanted, and Valentino, whether he was guided by Natasha, at least in part, in going on strike, before they went on the tour, Paramount, made him an offer of what he wanted, and for whatever reason, he turned it down. And he could have saved himself all of that stress of being on the tour. But that's a question that we can never answer, why he said no the first time. But it was all hammered out, and he made his 10-year return to Europe on the almost 10 years to the day that he returned, traveled to America, and his wish had come true, that he wanted to be famous and well known, and he was.
Okay, we have a suggestion from Tracy for you, Donna, to share your remembrances of touring inside Rudy Valentino's home, Falcon Layer, which is now gone.
Oh, well, that it was a wonderful experience, because even the Valentino family had not been inside the grounds of Falcon Layer, not since the days of Alberto and Jean in the late 1920s, early 30s. So once Doris Duke had purchased the property in the early 50s, it was sealed up, and only her close people, friends, acquaintances, whatever, ever got beyond those gates. So it was a very rare occasion, and the thrill of going through the gates the first time was wonderful, because you got to drive in, and there was a small fountain in the courtyard, the gravel, and you could imagine Valentino driving his big giant Isata Fraschini up that hill, which I can't imagine how he did it, because it was very narrow, and back in those days it was dirt road, it wasn't paved, and those big cars were no such thing as power steering, so it was very difficult to maneuver those things. But you drive in, and the first thing you would see would be the facade of the house, and the garage building with the 3 bays for the cars. Walking in the main foyer, there was not a lot that was original left in the house, because Doris Duke had remodeled it, although the layout was the same. But you walked in to see the doors that Rudy had purchased in Italy. I believe they were Italian. These heavily carved oak doors, which were magnificent. And they opened inward, and you walked into the main foyer, which was basically a hallway. You just walked in, and so there was a hallway either left or right. And you looked up, and the original wrought iron lantern was still there, and just above the doors were 2 very narrow stained glass windows. So those were original to the house. And the owner took us on a tour, and the house was very small, nothing like you would see for the homes that are, the ginormous McMansions, the huge places that are built in Hollywood to this day. It was very intimate, very small. I think it was 12 rooms. And we walked to the right, and the first room was the music room. And, again, it was very small. It was, the views were lovely to see. The interior of the rooms were missing all of the, what I call California Romantica style of that period. Doris Duke had remodeled the rooms to have like French Provençal, and so the beautiful fireplaces were taken down, and she had replaced them with these marble things, and the paint on the walls was very different. It was I don't think it was her. This may have been when her butler lived in the house after she passed away, and to not be crass, but it was like sort of like Gigi brothel paint. I mean, it was very bright and unpleasant, but you could still see the bones of the house. When you got to the living room, there were the triple arch windows that with the views that looked onto the the hillside and the valleys there in Beverly Hills, and the views were spectacular. And you could still see the in the dining room, which was just off of that one room, the beams in the ceiling, which were original to the house. There was a few other things that were original to the house. You went downstairs, you could see Valentino's bedroom, which had been extended a little bit, but the original windows that looked out to the yard were still there. And again, it was very small, intimate, and a nice little house. And you know, so much had been remodeled, especially the garage building, which was originally the servants' quarters, had been remodeled as a music studio and artist studio for one of the guys that Doris Duke later dated. And to this day, of course, that is the building that is extant, because the architect that owned the property, he was planning to, you know, rebuild the house. He had taken it down to the studs. And this was about 2004 or 5 when he still owned it. And he said that because of a zoning error that was done in the, you know, at the time the house was built, the actual gates of the property and the walls are into the roadway. So if anybody had wanted to, you know, take the walls down and, you know, move the gates, they would have to move the gates, because the actual road zoning was about halfway through the interior of that property inside the gates, which is why the gates remain there to this day, because if they take those down, then they're going to lose a chunk of that property because of zoning. Again, it was a wonderful and rare opportunity to walk the floors and get a feel of what Valentino's house was like. It was, while it, you know, didn't look the same as the vintage photographs that you can find online, it was the same, pretty much the same layout. And it was an honor to be able to see the place where he lived. It was really nice.
So this might be already being answered because I didn't know the name, but Sam asks, what do you think of George Ullman and his handling of the Valentino estate? And then my part 2 is, what did happen?
Well, when Valentino passed away, George Ullman was the executor of his estate. And, you know, Valentino was really bad with money. If he had money in his pocket, he spent it. So he wasn't entirely, you know, a good businessman in that respect. But the family felt that, you know, he was not doing right by them and by the estate, and they sued Ullman. And the legal battle went on for 20 years. I have not read a whole heck of a lot into the battle of the estate. It's pretty well documented in, I want to say, Alan Ellenberger's book on the Valentino mystique, and in Emily Leiter's biography, which I'm ashamed to say it's been a good 10 years since I've read it. You know, when Ullman was hired by Valentino, he was the man who brought forth the idea to go on the Mineral Lava tour. And during the 3+ months that they traveled across country on train, they formed a friendship. And again, Valentino and Natasha were not great business people. And, you know, they often didn't listen to the right voice. And I think, you know, Ullman was a friend to Valentino in many respects, but I don't know that he was the greatest businessman to handle all of their, you know, financial affairs. And later on, when Natasha and Valentino broke up, there certainly was, you know, a wedge drawn between them, and it's commonly, you know, believed that a big pusher of that wedge was George Ullman himself to split them apart. So, you know, it could have gone better, but of course, it was unfortunate for everybody involved.
So what ultimately happened to the building?
What, you mean Falconlair?
Yes.
Oh,
Mhm.
well, when 4 months after Rudy passed, or 5 months after Rudy passed, there was an auction of his property, and all of the contents of his home, and all of his possessions were auctioned in order to bring money into the estate to make it solvent. Falconlair was not sold at the first auction. It ultimately was kicked around and was rented for several years, and then Ann Harding and her husband purchased it. I want to say Hoot Gibson bought it. I might be wrong. It's a Western star who did buy it. It went through several hands before Doris Duke actually bought it in the 1950s. Yes, I see a thing from Tracy here that Juan Romero, yes, he was one of the purchasers. He owned it in the mid 40s before it was purchased by Doris Duke. And Juan Romero sunk a lot of money into the property, building onto the grounds. And the most recent owner of the property rebuilt a small religious shrine that is on the property that, people in the past have said, oh, that was Valentino's, but actually, no, that was built by Romero when he built up on the property in the 1940s.
So Tracy said that the Falconlair is gone. So that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, yes, the building is gone. After the architect who owned it sold the property, I want to say in 2006 or 2007, the house had been taken down to the studs, and once the new owner bought the property, they razed it completely. They bulldozed, the last bit of the house that was still standing.
The previous house he was in, you said, was in Whitley Heights.
Yes.
That house is gone now too, right?
Yeah, that house was torn down in the 1950s in anticipation of building the Hollywood Freeway.
That's right.
You can still see, one corner of the foundation, and I can't remember what actual exit it is. Tracy might be able to know that. I was up there with him before they built the sound walls up there. And we clambered down the hill and found some, bits of tile and crockery that were, left from the demolished house. But you can only see a little corner of what's left of the foundation of the house.
Well, that's right in the area where we all usually stay when we're down there for Cinecon. On Whitley is the name of the street. Mm-hmm. Where the hotel is. We always stay when we're down there for Cinecon, so it must be right around there.
Tracy said in the chat, it's the Cahuenga exit, is where you can see it.
So that's right near there.
Mm-hmm.
So very good. Well, if we're caught up on that, on the interactions at the moment, I wanted to get back to one subject as far as where Rudy is buried, and that was the Lady in Black. Could you kind of tell us a little bit about her?
I wish Tracy were here on the chat. He could give us chapter and verse on the Lady in Black.
Well, he can join us if you'd like.
But the original Lady in Black was named Dietrich Flamme, and she met Valentino early on. They shared, they lived in the same building, and I don't remember the name of it. Tracy can add that in the chat. We actually visited the building. I believe it's still standing.
I'm putting him so he can actually talk, so he can join you.
Good. Come on, Tracy. I'll shut up.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Tracy.
Hi there. Great job, Donna.
Oh, thank you, Tracy.
And you can do totally fine without my assistance, but I'll just throw in a couple of facts about the Lady in Black. She was 14 years old, and it was a boarding house where Rudy stayed, and it was over by MacArthur Park, and it's still standing there. Amazing, all of his homes have been razed, but the boarding house he lived in 1918 is still there. And also, I've been able to verify one of the letters he wrote to home has that address. So she would never have had, people accuse her of potentially making up her meeting Rudy, and she would, in the days before the internet, there's no way she would have had that knowledge of, you know, the exact address. But anyways, she met him at 14 at the boarding house. They were her parents, she was adopted, her parents knew the people that ran the boarding house there, and they were having like a potluck, and he had wandered in, and she was there on the couch, and he had a plate of food and struck up a conversation, and that's how it all started. And when she was she got a ear infection and was in the hospital, and apparently he visited her, and she was a little bit melodramatic and felt she was going to die. It wasn't life-threatening, but she said that to him, and he using psychology, had said, oh no, you're not going to die. I'll go before you, and apparently made this pact to visit me if I die first, kind of thing. And and then it took off from there. You know, the Lady in Black appearing, and I think in around 1940, originally it was called the Mysterious Lady in Black because no one knew who it was, and then became so many that she announced her reasons for going and her backstory, and then of course she became pretty much the most prominent, not the only one, but the most prominent one. And of course today now is the legend and tradition continues with Carrie Bible, who does the cemetery tours, but she upholds that tradition every year at the Valentino Memorial of keeping that legend alive, the Lady in Black. She's great at that.
Yes, thank you, Tracy. That was my next talk, was to give Carrie a plug, because I have taken her tour. There's one interesting story that Carrie has told when she was giving her tour, and she was right there next to Rudy's crypt there, and she was talking to this group of people, and in this group was this lady, just in her 20s, as far as Carrie could tell, a big Valentino fan, because all of a sudden this lady just runs out of the room with tears in her eyes, as Carrie was talking about Rudy, and she had a boyfriend there, and so Carrie talked to the boyfriend afterwards, and she said, God, what did I say? I'm so sorry. What did I say to make her just run out of the room? She said, oh, you didn't say anything wrong. She's just a big fan of Rudy, and just couldn't stand the strain, I guess, of being in the same room with him. So interesting story that, and Carrie Carrie tells it better than I do. Let's put it that way.
That's one thing that I find very interesting about Valentino's legacy, is that it is still very strong among fans, new fans, people 40 years younger than I am that are discovering Valentino to this day, and they're extremely passionate about every aspect of his life. It's remarkable that kind of charisma survives and is still winning new fans.
I thought I saw another comment come by.
I'm slacking here, sorry. Shauna says the Lady in Black is a cool tribute, and very cool. Our friend Carrie Bible carries on this Lady in Black tribute at Hollywood Forever, and we definitely want to suggest people go and do a tour of that place.
Yes, and if you would like to look at her schedule as to when she does them on weekends, her website for that is cemeterytour.com. So please check her out. Like I said, you'll love Hollywood Forever. It's a beautiful cemetery. They are refurbishing all the ground around a lot of the tombstones there, and of course the two most famous residents there now are Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney, but Rudy is the one that I always want to see. So anyway,
so we're at 45 minutes, and I think we've got our questions answered.
Okay. Oh, did I see one drop in?
I think we're where we're at. Oh,
Okay.
Q&A. Okay, we got another Q&A one here. What are the top 3 most daring or brave Valentino films? Daring or brave?
Daring or brave? That's not something that I've ever heard in connection with his films. I mean, I can say that he enjoyed doing his own stunts. He was particularly fond of doing them in The Eagle and in Son of the Sheik. And I would say my three favorites are Four Horsemen and then Eagle or Son of the Sheik. I mean, The Eagle is lovely because it allows Valentino to show his comedic side. It's much like Douglas Fairbanks' swashbuckling, tongue-in-cheek, like Mark of Zorro kind of thing, but set in Russia. Son of the Sheik, he certainly enjoyed doing his stunts on that film. He did not want to go back to being the Sheik, but recognized the benefit of doing so. Sadly, it was his last film. He certainly had a couple of other interesting films that were going to be lined up. But I think, you know, if only one film, and I know this doesn't really answer your question, if only one film were to exist of Valentino and it were The Son of the Sheik, I think that would have enough in it to let someone who had never seen Valentino know what all the fuss was about. It's, you know, a very swift film. It's tongue-in-cheek, it's got adventure, it's got romance, it touches all of the bases, and ultimately, you know, it was a home run for him, and it exceeds the Sheik in so many ways because it's more sophisticated and less serious and much more naturalistic. You can still see, you know, that Valentino was a good actor. I've always said that he, you know, rose and fell to the level of his director. And in this case, he was directed by George Fitzmaurice. And there is a level of sophistication and fun in Son of the Sheik that really lets you know that, you know, this is what the excitement was all about.
Well, he was pretty busy in that film since he plays both the father from the original Sheik and the son. And that's really great that they got Agnes Ayers to come back and play the mother.
Well, he was, you know, he stayed good friends with his co-stars. He was very good friends with Agnes. And of course, his part-time business manager was her husband, Manuel Riache, and Rudy was godfather to their daughter. And regarding him playing the dual role, the stories that I've always heard is that, you know, when he was made up as the elder Sheik with the beard and the mustache, and he enjoyed walking around the back lot because people didn't recognize him. And he thought that was just great.
You know, it took a little number of special effects for them to pull that off. And they already had it down pretty good. But there's one particular scene that's really hard where the father puts his arm around the shoulder of the son. And I'm still wondering, God, how did they do that?
The split screen on the film is really well done. It still holds up today.
It holds up better than a lot of the of that same special effect that other films tried at that time. I think they did the best job on that. So, anything else?
I think we're looking good here.
Okay.
Well, what do you think? What do you think of the film biography of Valentino with Anthony Dexter?
Not much. It's, you know, like so many Hollywood stars where they do a cinema bio, it is so highly fictionalized. There's barely a germ of truth in it. I think Dexter, you know, in certain scenes, he certainly bore a striking physical resemblance to Rudy, but then you hear his Nebraska accent and it's not a great film. It had lots of other troubles because of the fictionalization of the Eleanor Parker character and the Richard Carlson character as the director, and her being similar to Alice Terry, who then, you know, sued the production because she, of course, had no romance with Valentino whatsoever. You know, he's not been served well like anybody else has with a film bio.
Well, speaking of actresses that he has been with, I would say the one that he was with the most, would you say, would be Vilma Banky?
Twice with Vilma Banky.
I thought it was more than that.
No, only twice. Nita Naldi was twice, going to be 3 times. Excuse me, Nita was 3 times, going to be 4. And you know, he and Nita had a good friendship. And she's one of the few silent stars that I wish I could have met her, because she was a hoot.
Yeah, I guess you are a daughter of Naldi, right?
Yeah. Oh yes.
Yes, that's the name of the Appreciation Society for her, is Daughters of Naldi.
And it's
Ah,
a-
yes.
By the way,
It's
I
a
asked you
secret
this
group.
during your presentation. What movie is this from behind me, and who is this with Rudy?
That's Wanda Hawley, and that's from The Young Raja.
Ah, very good, very good. So, if we're caught up,
Mhm.
looks like this is going to be it. So thank you all so much for coming to this Q&A and this talk. If you haven't seen our recorded Zoom, where Donna does all of this, shows all of these pictures of Rudy from her book, please check that out. And this Zoom is also being recorded and will be available at some point. Tracy, thank you for your knowledge. Anything else you would like to add?
No, I just think it's really great. You know, Donna has been one of my early mentors when I arrived on the scene, and I learned a lot from her. I love her book. I'm waiting for her next one, and we'll get there. But
We'll get there.
yeah, no, Donna is a valued, respected member of the Valentino community, and I'm grateful to have her as a friend.
And same with you, Tracy. And you know, you've got the most amazing collection on Rudy that you share, you know, with everybody. And you also do such a nice job every year with the annual memorial service. So that's great.
We hope to see you this year there.
I'm planning to come.
Michael, why don't you show Donna's book? Yeah, I think you have it right next to you, and we have it available in our store.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you
Thank
can
you
buy
for
it on
the reminder.
Amazon, but we'd prefer you to buy it. We'd prefer you to buy it from us if you possibly can. Our store is open from 12 to 4 Saturdays and Sundays.
Raina, do you guys do mail order? Because you know, I'd also like to put a plug in. I mean, I donated 10 or 15 copies to you guys to raise money for Niles, and I'd
We
love
sure
to see it
appreciate
sell out.
that.
I'm sure we can arrange for that. We haven't quite gotten to the, I know we're way behind the times as far as mail orders and such, but we've actually just gotten an interim store manager to help us out. So hopefully we're going to get to the point where we can start doing mailings. So if somebody's interested, they can just send us an email. We can try to work it out to send a copy, because we greatly appreciate all of your support, Donna. And we hope to have more Valentino for Valentine's programs. It just seems like a natural fit for us to have it at that time of year. So hopefully by next year, we're going to be back in person. But nice thing about this is it'll live on. So if you want to send an email, you can always send an email to pr@nilesfilmmuseum.org to arrange for a book to be sent to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rena. Thank you, Tracy. And thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you so much, Donna.
Thank you, Michael and Raina. Thanks so much for having me, and you know, letting us do the recording earlier. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
So all of you have a great evening, and hope to see you again soon.